Secret Library podcast is brought to you in part by our amazing Patreon members. I want to give a special shout out to them for being a part of supporting the show. If you'd like to join and get solo episodes inside my writing process, as well as the chance to submit questions for special Q&A episodes, you can check it out and join at patreon.com/secretlibrary. As we're getting close to the halfway point in this season, I wanted to answer a question that some of you may be asking, which is, okay, it's really great to listen to all these episodes and learn all of this material, but how do we put this into practice? How do I move forward and use all of this material in my own writing life? Well, I'm so glad that you asked, because starting in April, we're going to release the Next Draft course, where I will be walking you through all of the tips, tricks, and resources from the season, as well as the inside scoop on how I've applied it in the revision of my own novel. If you would like to get notified when the course is first available, you can subscribe to Footnotes at secretlibrarypodcast.com. The Secret Library podcast is made possible by our incredible Patreon supporters. If you'd like to become one and get the opportunity to hear solo episodes with me from inside my writing process, as well as submit questions for tailored Q&A episodes every month, you can join the club at patreon.com/secretlibrary. Remember, if you're worried about the season ending and not knowing how to apply everything that you've learned to your own writing, we've got you covered. You can sign up for Footnotes, our newsletter, at secretlibrarypodcast.com, and you'll get notified first when the Next Draft course is released this April. This is the Secret Library podcast, and my guest this week is the amazing Tasha Harrison. Lovers of the show will remember her past episodes, one on writing hot sex scenes, and also another how she and her podcast co-host, Kate Newberg, plan and succeed during NaNoWriMo. In addition to being the author of 7 novels of erotica and romance, Tasha is also an editor, so she's here for the professional's take on revision. This episode, we discuss what editors are looking for in a strong draft and how an editor will approach revision when working with you on your book. This way you can get ahead of the game before you even submit or hit publish on your own. You can get notes, links, and more information from this episode and sign up for Footnotes, weekly letters about writing, to your inbox at secretlibrarypodcast.com. I'm really happy to have Tasha back on. She is always the most fun to talk to, so it's a real delight. So here we go with Tasha Harrison. I am really happy to have you on because I'm always happy to have people on who both write and edit. And because you have said to me that you love revision and that revision is your favorite part of the process, I was like, gotta get on that, because I think we get so many messages about, oh, I have to revise and it's going to take forever and it's going to be exhausting, and drafting is the fun part. So what are the mistakes you see that people make the most with revision? Because you're doing it yourself, but you're also witnessing it as an editor.
The biggest mistake most people make with revision is that all they do is add and take nothing away. They think that revision is just fattening the story and not trimming the fat. They don't want to kill their darlings as much as we tell them to do it. They just keep adding and adding to that fucker, and then they send it to you and it's 140,000 words. And you're like, what are you doing?
That's a lot. That's a lot of book. Yeah, I think we have to sort of separate ourselves from this feeling that the words are connected through blood vessels and everything to our life force. And then if we cut them off, we're going to die.
That's all in the way we talk about this shit, though.
Yeah.
My book baby. I birthed a book. No, you didn't. You made some words. It's an accomplishment, but it's not a child.
Right.
Okay. It's a product. You created a thing. Are you doing that with if knitting metaphor? Are you doing this with your sweater or your scarf?
Totally.
Oh God.
No, I'm just kidding.
So I don't know.
No, I usually, if it fits properly, I will wear it out in public. If it doesn't, then I will hide it in a drawer. Yeah, that's true.
Or unravel and start from scratch.
Exactly.
So a painting metaphor. If I have a couple of artist friends that paint, if it doesn't come out right the first time, they just gesso over the bitch and start over. only writers are like that. Like they just get so precious. Like, oh, it required so much mental anguish. This is my baby was like giving birth. The process is difficult because that's the process. Everyone has a hard time creating things from nothing, like anything you create from nothing is hard, but you have to separate yourself from it once it's done, like at every stage.
I think it's harder in some ways because it's easier to see a painting as separate from you. It's easier to see a sweater or, a cooked dish or something. Those are separate physical, tangible objects. But it feels like because it's words and because we sort of live and breathe words and words are happening inside of our heads all the time, it feels like it's our thoughts and sort of our innermost being out on the page. I wonder if that's what makes it harder.
I mean, I get it, but I don't get it.
Right. I mean, I'm just playing devil's advocate here, but
no. I mean, like, I get it. I get it. I understand why people, because I mean, pretty much every character that you create has a piece of you. It's born from something, either an experience you've had or someone or some part of your personality or whatever. So you're never just creating things that don't have some type of foundation in your lived experience. However, it's not you. It's not, I don't know. When you were talking about like paintings or, making food for someone, it kind of feels the same way. Like yes, you're writing for yourself because you're your first reader, but you're writing also in hopes that someone else would want to read it. So you can't, if you're going to give it to someone, you can't be so attached to it that you don't want to, you don't want to give it away. Like you don't want to give it.
Yeah.
Like this is my gift, but I also want to keep it for myself. Sorry.
Yeah, it's like we want to give it away, but we want to retain control of it also.
Yes.
And in that way, it is sometimes like children.
It's like, yes, you can go out in the world, but absolutely do not do anything that I don't want you to do.
Right.
No one can say anything to you that I don't like,
Tricky. I mean, I think one of the people, Diana Gabaldon of Outlander, I saw her speak once and she said, well, it's just words. I'll just write some more. Like if I cut it, it was so baller. It was so baller because she just said, yeah, I just, because the interviewer said, well, what happens if you're researching, you have all this history in there and you're trying to get the history right. And what if you realize that you misunderstood or your research reveals that the history's wrong? She's like, then I'll just write something else. It's fine. And she's like, I'll just cut it. It's no big deal.
And everybody, all the writers in the room, like,
I know everyone was like, oh, what?
What do you mean?
Yeah.
I have a writer friend that's kind of like that. She's like how I save all my scraps. She's like, why are you doing that? I might use them later. She's like, no, if they weren't good enough for this book, they're not going to be good enough for anything else. Just throw them away. I was like, you go too far, ma'am. That's a bridge too far.
Yeah.
Like I have no problem cutting it from the manuscript, but throwing it away completely? Absolutely not. We're not doing that.
It's fascinating. I mean, it's because when you said that about the notebook and like tearing pages out, I was at a coffee with a friend once, like 10 or 12 years ago. She probably doesn't even remember this, but I still do. And she had a Moleskine, which at the time was still kind of a she, like, ooh, Moleskine.
Oh, you're a real writer if you're writing in there.
Yeah. And she was writing some stuff down and then she finished a page and we were talking about, things that were important in life now versus the past. And she just tore the page out and she looked at me and she goes, that's how interested I am in the past. And I was like, oh, you're hardcore.
You're a savage.
It was amazing. But I think it's true. It's like we have to write, I think, and hold it a little bit lightly going into revision with the sense of, I'm going to give it my all. And I'm also going to accept that it might have to go.
Right.
At the same time, which is hard.
Because you're going to have to let it all go eventually.
True.
There's going to come a time. Yeah, there's going to be a time when you can't change it anymore. It's done. It's out there. It's over.
Yep. It's fascinating. I mean, I think that the problem is like, I think it's so hard to stop because as a human who is learning more and more, the more you write, if you read a book 10 years after you finish it and put it out, you could find something that you would want to do differently. So Absolutely. The other thing that's hard is it's really hard to know when it's done. Like, how do you know when it's done?
I don't know.
The
I don't
eternal
feel
question.
no, honestly, no. I feel like none of the stories are done. Like what I really wish would happen is like I would write a story and then these people stop taking up residence in my head. Like they just move on and go live their lives and have their happy ever after somewhere else. But that doesn't happen. Like I will randomly think of like in a book that I wrote 5 years ago, what is this couple doing? Oh, do they have kids? And I'll spend a whole day just thinking about like what their life looks like now. Do I need to write a story about that? No. But sometimes I feel compelled because it's like, oh, is their story done? Because this feels really interesting to me. And then I have to stop myself from sitting down and wasting weeks writing something like nobody's going to read this. Nobody cares. Like I'm the only one who cares that she couldn't pick out the right curtains. Like, what the fuck?
I think this is why I think there are reasons for series. Like people like to come back to the same setting and the same characters, and then they like to know what happened next and all of this. And I see why it happens.
Yeah, definitely.
So do they just leave after that day? You spend a day with them and it's like a reunion and then they move on?
Sometimes, but no, they don't. They always pop up. And you know what? It happens a lot around holidays.
Really?
It's kind of like thinking about like, oh, my family's going to be here. I'm going to spend time with my family. Oh, I wonder what my characters are doing. It's so stupid.
It's really cute though.
Like, oh, I wonder how they're spending their Christmas or Thanksgiving. Like, how'd that go? And I'll sit there and think about it. I'm like, should I write this? And sometimes I will do like I'll write it like as a newsletter story, like just like, oh, this is a little drop in with so-and-so from this book. And
that's
it'll be
so
like
cute.
2,000 words. But sometimes, like, really, I do think a lot about them during the holidays. Like, oh, what are they doing?
That's so cute. What if you did, okay, not to like prescribe to you, but what if you did like a Valentine's collection of like, where are they now? It could be like a collection of short stories and it would be like a whole reunion roundup.
I've thought about this. I've thought about doing this. This is not something that I have not considered because I think about it so much. It's like, these thoughts are here for a reason. I'm like, are they, or are you just insane?
I don't think you're insane at all, for one thing. And I think that it would be really fun, especially people who read your books regularly. I mean, I do that too, even as a reader, where I think about characters and I miss them and I want to know what they're doing and I miss them.
That's so bizarre. It's like, this is not a real person. I really invented this person in my head. Yeah. Why do I miss spending time with them? And I think like after every book, there's kind of like a period of mourning, like a period of melancholy. It's like, oh, I'm done. And then you release it and it's like, okay, what do I do now?
Yeah.
Like, I miss
Where'd all my friends go?
All my friends that live in the magic box on my table. Like, where are they now? What are they doing? I'm so lonely, you know? Yeah. Like it's a bizarre part of the process. Like I try not to think about that too much because I wonder if like I'm the only one who does it.
You're not. I even do it as a reader. Like I finish a book and I'm like, oh,
it was so fun to spend time with you, even though you're messy as hell. Like,
yeah,
you know, like I do think about them a lot. I do. They don't stop living. Like they take up residence in my head.
So where do you put them all? Because, you know, the more books you write, the more of them they're going to be.
Girl, that's what I was about to ask. Like when I get old, right? Like these are because a lot of times, like I'll have these conversations with my husband. It's like, you know, is this what dementia really is? Like, are they just not talking? It's not that they're talking to people that, you know, don't exist. It's like these people actually exist to them. So it's like, just like think about a writer who has created all these people for their whole lives. And then they get dementia. Like, am I going to be talking to characters that I wrote when I was in my 30s and 40s when I'm 80 and sitting here drooling on the step? Like, what is this? What happens?
I don't know, man.
It's kind of like, it's frightening, but it's also kind of like, well, when I can
sounds like a good story for a book.
Like I could just hang out with them afterwards. Like if I can't, like I've lost the ability to write, then, you know, doesn't mean that the stories stop. I can still hang out with them. It makes me think of, I don't know if you watched 6 Feet Under, you know,
yeah, I did. I didn't watch like every episode, but I watched a lot of it.
So did you see the finale?
I know about it.
Okay, so in the finale, Claire is a photographer, right? But she's blind. So she in the finale they show how everyone dies.
Yeah.
So she's the youngest, so she dies last, and she's blind, and she's in the room by herself. She doesn't have any kids. Her husband's already died. And she's in there, and there's like, a hospice nurse in the room with her. And like on the wall behind her bed, there's like all of these photographs that she's taken of all the people that she loves. And she's just kind of laying there with her clouded eyes, but it looks like she's looking at things. So the way that they made the episode is like, it's all kind of her memories of how things have happened, like it's her life, like how people died, how, she ended up being the last one, and then she dies.
Right.
And I'm kind of like, am I going to be clear with the photographs? Like all these photographs here, and I'm just going to be laying there blind in the bed, just thinking about all the characters today. It doesn't seem sad.
No, I don't think it does. I think that's probably why we're writing. But I'm like, you better get as many characters as you can, because then you're going to be, you're going to have a lot of friends.
There's only one, like Harper Lee. Who is she thinking about? Like,
I know she doesn't have enough.
She don't have enough.
I know. Oh, but they're all going to be there. But I think this is the thing, is like, you know that you did a good job, and you know that you got it right when they're real enough that you wonder about them later.
Okay. I'll take that.
I think it's fair. I accept it too.
Well, like these are the things that I think about, like when I don't have anything to do. This is when my brain needs to be occupied all the time, because I'll start thinking about like, morbid shit, like what happens when everyone else dies and I'm the only one here with me and my characters.
Yeah. It's always, or it's like, what happens? I think about what happens to the ones, like I think about this idea and then I decide it doesn't work. And then, I set it aside. Like, what happens to those characters? Are they trapped in limbo somewhere? Are they?
No, they get big magicked.
Okay.
They go on to someone else.
Okay, I hope so.
Such a relief. Like,
oh my God, what a relief.
When I was reading that book and I got to that thing where she was like, oh, I created this character and then I passed it on to my friend, and look at what the wonderful book she wrote. And I'm like, I feel so much better now.
Yes.
It's like, okay, so I've been thinking about this character for God knows how long, and I've never gotten around to writing the book. So like if I see someone who has written a book that's kind of like the character, like I'm like, oh, there you go.
She went elsewhere.
Like she already wrote it. There you go. I don't need to write it anymore. I don't need to feel guilty about it. I can delete it from my random idea file now.
Yep. Yeah, I think maybe the most important thing about revision is what to delete, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
It's what you let go of.
All that comes from not holding it too closely.
Yeah.
Strong ideas loosely held.
Exactly. So what happens? So what are you looking for when you go through and want to delete? Like, so you're going through, you've put them back in, you're going back in, maybe there's too much. What bits are you deleting?
Most of the time it's repetition. Like if I'm, like you give someone a quirk and then you use it too much.
Mm-hmm.
Or I find myself sometimes like I'll say things in narrative and then repeat it in dialogue. And it's like, you need to make a choice. Like, is this narrative or is this dialogue? Too much transition shit. Nobody cares about them walking and moving through the room. Like, stop staging. She came in, she put her glass on the end table. On the end table was such and such and such. This is just filler that you're putting in because you're trying to get to the next point when you're writing a draft. So you're just like, yada, yada, yada. So this is what the room looks like. Oh, this is what I really need to write. When you go back in there, it's like, why do I need to know all of this shit? Delete.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's, staging is one of those things that a lot of people get really sensitive about. It was like, well, how do we know what's in the room? It was like, you just need to give like 2 or 3 touch points and it needs to connect to the character. You don't need to be telling like every little detail.
Yeah.
And on the wall was this piece that she bought when she was on vacation in Tennessee. She liked it because of yada, yada, yada. What's that have to do with anything?
Right. Also like the reader's imagination will fill in something. If you give them like a
some
style, you give them a little bit, but then let them fill it in with something they're excited about so that they can get attached.
Yeah. And it makes more sense too if it's connected to the character, like just describing a room. I mean, is this like a catalog? Like,
is it like Fight Club with his IKEA catalog?
Yeah, exactly. That's what it kind of feels like. And whenever I encounter, I'm like, oh, I didn't know what I was trying to say here. So this is what all this is, just filler. So mostly stuff like that. Repetition, filler, tics that you give them that they do too much.
Yep. The other one is when you use like a big word or a particular image. And I've seen this happen a few times recently where like there's a word that somebody likes and I do this too. And then they use it again, even like 3/4 of the way through the book. And I'm like, you said that before. Like I'm probably
a big word. Especially if it's a big word. Like it's like, okay, so yes, you have a vocabulary. Brilliant. But we don't need to be using this word so much. Or,
it's like use it once. Or an image. I mean, it makes me think of this bit of Eddie Izzard's comedy where he has this bit about standing there looking, I think I'm going to botch it because he's obviously funnier than me, but he said like, oh, you sit there and then you got, James Dean, like one toothpick in the corner of the mouth looks quite cool. But if you put 2 toothpicks, you're looking like a dickhead. And it's like, you go too far with the thing. Yeah. You go from quite cool to looking like a dickhead.
The first time you said this was cool. Now it's just kind of like you're trying to be cool.
Yeah. Or you liked this image that you used that I thought was really striking the first time. But when it comes back, I'm like, 2 toothpicks. No.
And one of the other things that I see a lot too, especially, all writers have these, like they have tics, like their own writing tics, like they'll start a sentence the same way.
Yep.
Like for me, it's parenthetical phrases. Like I will throw in a parenthetical phrase. Like, I don't know why. Like I was like, what are you doing here? Just write the whole sentence. You don't need to pause here and say anything. Just get the point out. And some people will do that, like passive voice. And people have like a really hard time understanding what passive voice is. And like, you don't
passive voice.
And I keep telling them, it was like, if you are using a bunch of ings, that's a sign.
Yeah.
You need to be more active. No inging. Stop inging. ED.
Yep.
Because like ing to me is like, oh, it's continuing. He's passing. He's doing. He's like, it's a continuous motion. I was like, if you're writing in past tense, why are we inging so much? Stop inging.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I'll tell, the writers that I work with, because I'm like, I don't understand what passive voice is. They're like, well, it's a lot of things, but it's definitely this. And
it's also when you make the object the subject.
Yes.
That one drives me crazy because it's very much like I used to work for an auction house, an auction catalog. And of course they were selling things and we'd have to say the thing was, was made by, or it was created by, or blah, blah, blah. I'm like, ugh, I just want to say like, so-and-so made the thing. Like it's so much more direct.
Yeah, these are more succinct.
But it's not, they're like, but we're not selling the person who made it. We're selling the thing. So it's got to be the thing at the center. So it was a lot of passive voice.
Yeah. And another thing I find people doing, like giving body parts, independent body parts like autonomy. My hands reached. My eyes scan the room. You just scan the room.
Right.
You're looking with your eyes. Your eyes are part of the character. The eyes are part of the character. The hands are part of the character. Stop saying that the hands reach, because then I'm thinking of the Addams Family hand just
doing its own.
Just doing its own thing. I'm like, well, so what's the character doing when the hands are reaching? What are they doing?
They taking a nap?
They're taking a nap. They're across the room. They're having a drink. I hope they only using one hand.
Maybe they have 3 hands. No, that's a good point. Oh my God. I didn't think about that one. Yeah, it's true. It's true.
In some cases it does work. Like if it's a action scene, like scrambling feet or grappling hands, that sort of thing. It's different when it's like you're describing that sort of action. But if it's like a character involved in the scene and like they're reaching for someone or they're touching something, or, that the character's involved in that action.
Yeah. Unless they're having an out-of-body experience, they're involved.
Well, that's something else altogether. That's a different type of story.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, and every day, yeah, Yeah, I think it's very difficult. It's like a question of trust. It's like, how much do I trust my reader to understand what I'm trying to say? And I think there's always this question of either trusting them too much or not trusting them enough.
And I think a lot of us lean more toward not trusting them enough. And when you go through the revision, you're like, why am I explaining this so explicitly? Like, is it really important that they should know this? Like, only explain things or tell them things explicitly if it's very important to the character or to move the plot forward. Otherwise, you can give them vagaries. They'll fill in the blanks themselves. It's fine. That's what imagination is about. That's what reading is about. I'm like, I have to tell people a lot of times, like, this is not a movie. Yes, you wanted to create pictures in your reader's mind, but it's not a movie. Like, you can't just try to make a movie in your reader's head, because then it comes out like you're trying to make a movie. You know what I mean? Like, then you're
you don't need like set decorations or stage directions.
Yeah. Like, they still don't need, like, you're not on your spot. You got to move. He's got to move slightly. He moved slightly to the left, and then he turned to her. Like, what? Why is there all this blocking?
Yeah.
Like, are we acting this out later? Like, what's going on? Yeah, that sort of stuff. I see the hands reaching, that sort of thing is like my pet peeve.
Interesting.
I love you all, authors that I work with. This is not a knock.
Well, I think there's things that we do ourselves. And so I'm particularly sensitive to it. Like, I will use a word I like twice in a paragraph in the first draft and not know it. And I will do it with a different word on the next page and a different word on the next page. I don't know how it happens. It's like I'm in a fugue state.
Yeah, because that's our first draft. That's
yep.
Why.
Yeah, because don't judge yourself on that.
You're trying to get done. But when you go back to revision, you have to be the type of person to be like, why am I doing this? Like, you're doing, like, what? Why do I keep doing this? This is dumb. And I will even write, like, I'll make highlights in my Kindle, like, girl, why do you keep doing this? Like, stop doing this. This is a dumb sentence. Like, why do you keep doing this? Or, like, I'll encounter a lot of people who will always put the adverb before the subject. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense.
What do you mean?
Patiently he, like, instead of saying he patiently, they'll be like, patiently he. So I'm like, And I think a lot of times, like, because to me, it sounds like someone, like Spanish, like because that's the way it naturally happens. And if you're translating it into English, it'll come out that way. I don't know, but it feels like a lot of times I'm like, why are you doing so many adverbs before the subject of this sentence? I'm like, isn't that the way it's supposed to be? Like, no.
Yeah, it's like you're trying to set the tone. It's like you're trying to turn on some nice music before something happens. But you're like, no, it's okay. You put it later.
You could just tell me. you could just have them appear in the room. It's fine.
Yeah, exactly. Ugh, so many things.
It's so hard. But I mean, like, I shared like that writing tip about the hands on Twitter the other day, and this guy retweets, and he's just like, it's so much writing tips and advice sounds like it's trying to make everybody sound the same. And I responded, I was like, but doing this, you do sound the same. I was like, I shared this tip because everyone is doing this. Like, you think that you're doing something specific. I was like, this is not style. This is not voice. This is just wrong.
Yep.
And I think a lot of people don't, like, the whole thing with style and voice. I'm like, that's just the way I write. I'm like, yeah, but some of this is not style or voice. This is just, it makes it difficult to read.
Yep. Yeah, style and voice is not gimmicks or clever things. Style and voice, you don't notice, you just feel it.
Yeah. That's how you can, it's kind of the same thing like when you see like directors of films or writers of certain genres of films. Like if a scene comes up, you're like, oh, this feels like so-and-so. That's style. That's voice. But like doing something the exact same way every time, that sounds like you're copying someone else. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. But... And then I also told him, he's like, the good thing about advice is that no matter how good it is, you can always not take it.
Right.
It's like good or bad.
You can say no.
That's fine. You'll still be wrong, but that's cool too.
Yeah, I think it's that, when it comes down to it, it's like there isn't a right or a wrong with writing. I sometimes feel like people make those mistakes and say things that are less effective or are distracting. I think of things that are distracting versus not distracting. It's not that it's wrong. I mean, it's perfectly effective English.
Yeah,
but
like I understand what you were trying to say, but there's
I'm now thinking about these hands floating in the air, and I'm not in the mood that
scrambling across the. Yeah, like I'm just thinking about the hand scrabbling across the floor instead of like, oh, he's touching her, and I'm supposed to be paying attention to that. I'm like, no, I'm just hands. I'm thinking about hands independent of a body.
Right. And is that what you intended? Is that what you wanted? If that is what you wanted, then you have succeeded. But if you wanted the hands to be attached, then
to a character,
don't lead with the hands.
Yeah, don't lead with the hands. He's saying my hands, they're their hands. You don't have to. You don't have to say hands at all. Everybody knows you touch with your hands.
Common sense. Yeah, I think this is probably the kind of thing that, listen to editors or listen to readers if they tell you something is distracting, and then think about, is that how you want them to feel? Do you want them to notice this, or do you want them to glide right by it and stay with the story?
Right. Like what are you painting here? What scene are you painting? What emotion are you trying to convey? And if anything you do in the narrative distracts from that, then you got to cut it.
Yeah.
You got to fix it.
Cut it out, people.
Stop it. Just stop.
Just stop. Well, thank you. No, go.
Sorry,
go. No. Finish your thought.
I don't even remember what the thought was now because I interrupted myself.
You stopped it.
I stopped it.
Well, I was going to say, I think that's the best point we could stop on, because I want people to remember, cut the stage directions, cut the things that are distracting, cut the things that are confusing.
Cut the repetitive things.
Cut the repetitive things. And if you still think about your characters later, you're not crazy, because we all do it too.
I don't know. That last part, I don't know.
I'm sticking with it. I think it's worth it.
I'm going to ride with it. It's fine.
I know. I can't wait to hear the anthology. You got to tell us what's out.
I'm not doing that. With what time?
I don't know. Find it, girl. Well, thank you so much for coming back on. It's awesome to have you, as always.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to the Secret Library podcast. We hope you've enjoyed this week's show. You can keep the conversation going by leaving a comment in the show notes at secretlibrarypodcast.com, or visit us on Facebook at facebook.com/secretlibrarypodcast. You can also connect directly with me on Twitter or Instagram, where I'm Caro Donahue. That's at CaroDonahue. I look forward to chatting with you there. See you next week. Until then, happy writing.